All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give it another second here for some folks to join, and we will get ready to go. Okay, 12:30. Thank you all for joining me today. Since we're here to talk about Gen Z, I'm going to go ahead and get us into our topic for today. So I'm excited to touch base on a somewhat scary and exciting topic for many of you, and that's figuring out how to connect with Gen Z job seekers. Over the last decade or so, millennials have dominated the conversation when it comes to the younger workforce. But as millennials age into management roles and establish their careers, the next generation we want to start focusing on is Gen Z. And that is exactly what we're going to do today. Before we get into that, I'll just intro myself a little bit. My name is Tiffany. I have been with Hierology for going on 2 years now, and I work with some of Hierology's largest automotive customers. And prior to coming to Hierology, I spent about 8.5 years at Ford Motor Company in the Chicago region. So all in all, I have about 10 years of automotive experience. So I'm excited to loop you guys into something that I think is a really important topic in the automotive industry. So before we dig into our Gen Z content, I wanted to provide a quick state of the market overview to show just how important it is for dealerships today to understand the needs of our Gen Z workers. Today, it really feels like there are two conflicting job markets. On one hand, we have the tech space, where many businesses in the sector are grappling with layoffs and hiring freezes due to the recession and overhiring during the pandemic. And this has left the number of active job seekers in the sector far outweighing the number of open jobs. But unlike with other industries that employ essential workers, the automotive sector is facing a completely different reality. There is a massive shortage of qualified mechanics and technicians that are available to meet the demand in the space. And this is due in part to the pandemic, which sort of served as a catalyst for workers to reevaluate their careers and their priorities. But it's also due to decades of declining enrollment in tech schools combined with retiring baby boomers. This shortage of qualified workers for these types of roles impacts dealerships' ability to service cars and therefore the bottom line. All this is to say that it is absolutely critical that dealerships find ways to recruit, hire, and retain workers. And given the changing demographics of the current workforce, understanding the needs of these younger workers and making the necessary changes to attract and hire them is absolutely necessary for your dealership's long-term success. So just to give you some more context around just how bad the shortage actually is, experts at TechForce Foundation predict that by next year, the industry will be short more than 640,000 automotive technicians. This further underscores just how important it is for us to focus on the newest generation of workers in the job market today. So who exactly is Gen Z? I want to dig into some of their characteristics and what makes them different from older generations and really lay the groundwork for understanding the perspective of this group. But before I do that, I want you to think about your dealership and think about whether you have any Gen Zers that currently work for you. Have you interviewed any recently? And how do you feel about those employees and how they interviewed and how they work at your dealership? It'll be helpful for you to sort of reflect on this as I go through the presentation so you can make sure to take away some actionable things that you can start tomorrow. Gen Z is really defined as anyone born between 1997 and 2012. So anyone that is 26 years and under. And by 2025, it's estimated that this group will make up just over a quarter of the workforce. So this means it's really time for you to redefine your processes in order to make your dealership and your jobs more attractive to this group as they continue to make up a larger and larger portion of the job market each year. And while it's easy to want to compare this generation to millennials, they're truly wildly different. Most millennials are in their mid-30s at this point. They're pretty far in their careers, and they're much more adjusted to the processes and the status quo set by their older counterparts. Millennials are also more likely to follow the status quo set by Gen Z and boomers because they remember a time before the internet and they were already experienced in the workforce like well before the pandemic hit. So Gen Z, quite the opposite. And I'm going to put a little bit more context and color into this generation and how they differ from millennials. So the oldest members of Gen Z were born when AOL Instant Messenger launched. They were only 1 when Google was founded. They were 10 when the first iPhone was released, and they were 12 when Uber was founded. So Uber was around for 4 years before any of them even got a driver's license. And the gig economy in general, which includes Uber, was very well established and common by the time they graduated college. Additionally, these individuals have never used phone books. They've never made phone calls to make doctor's appointments or schedule dinner reservations. They are a generation that has come of age only knowing mobile, digital, and a highly connected world. To them, everything can and should be done online. And not only that, but from a mobile device. And this age group, they don't even remember a time before any of these massive technological advancements that largely define how we live and work today. And millennials are widely different than this. They are the last generation to remember a time before all these tech advancements, which makes them more likely to conform to the status quo than Gen Zers. Another interesting trend among Gen Z is that they're much more interested in non-traditional freelance gig work than any other generations. And this is likely due to social media offering these opportunities along with this generation's unique view on the world and general questioning of that status quo. They want to do things differently and are driven to find their own paths to success. Part of the reason why is that they have a different view on work and life. They don't necessarily see work and life as separate, but rather they see life as their professional and personal worlds mixed together. And freelance and gig work, it really affords them the freedom to live that way. In fact, half of Gen Z in the workforce participated in freelance work on some level in 2020, and the number falls pretty significantly when you look at older generations. In addition to being digitally native and having this entrepreneurial drive to work on their own terms, Gen Z is also defined by a number of other factors. One of the most significant being that the vast majority of these folks have never held a job in a pre-pandemic setting. The oldest of these folks graduated college in 2018, 2019. So some may have a few pre-March 2020 years under their belt, but most don't. And to them, everything that we had to do to adjust to the pandemic in March of 2020, like remote work, limiting in-person connection, and really transitioning to online sales predominantly, is just the norm. And of course, this is going to bleed into their expectations for potential employees. So some additional points to mention on this topic is largely because they grew up in the era of social media, these individuals are disproportionately affected by stress and anxiety. And of course, this has a ripple effect into the workplace. They're also less loyal and they change jobs more often than their older counterparts. And they're more racially diverse. And this is interesting. And if 1 in 4 Gen Zers is Hispanic, compared to just 4% of baby boomers and 12% of just Gen X. So rightfully so, they have higher standards for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts from the employer. And finally, they have really been named the first global generation, which means that they're from the first generation that can really access any information and connect with folks from anywhere in the world with the click of a button. This influences expectations for work as well because they have broader horizons and have access to so many different perspectives that they don't feel connected to the status quo set by their parents and by their parents' parents. So it's easy to write off the demands or expectations among younger people when you're someone who has put in the work in the years in the industry. But it's also important to remember that this generation is the future. Not only the future of our workforce, but also the future of your customer base. So we need to take their expectations and their worldview seriously. I remember the first Gen Zer I truly met when I was working at Ford at my last company. And when they started, I was a little bit scared. These people they worked so differently than I did and my peers, and they really didn't have the same mindset as we were used to. And looking back, I wish I would have understood it a little bit better versus trying to get them to see the world and the workplace the way that I did. So I put this quote in here from Mark Cuban so that you can hear this from somebody else besides me as well. And he explained how he feels Gen Z is the greatest generation because they are at the forefront of change when it comes to work as we know it. And they're forcing employers to make real and lasting changes that will impact generations to come for the better. So if you're not already thinking about how you look at career growth and flexibility, however that works in your dealership, it's going to be detrimental not only to your ability to hire as Gen Z continues to make their mark on the workforce, but also in your ability to serve customers because this age group is going to become your customers too. They're going to look at businesses holistically and not only work for, but also give their business to dealerships that meet them where they are. So we know that these individuals are digital natives. We know that these individuals are digital natives. They're entrepreneurial in nature, and they're very strongly interested in making work for them on their terms. On the surface, this seems like a difficult generation to convince to come and join your payroll. But the good news is there are things that you can do to adjust your jobs, processes, and so forth to make your dealership more attractive to this group of people. So the first major expectation or general takeaway as it relates to automotive is the overarching fact that Gen Z does not view the industry as the answer to their needs. I want to dig into some data in regards to this topic. We know Gen Z is different from older generations. But in a recent hierarchy study of job seekers, we found some interesting findings that continue to point to this. The first being that half of Gen Z job seekers say they would take a lower paying job in exchange for greater flexibility, when 41% of boomers and 45% of Gen X reported the same thing. Again, this points to what we were discussing earlier. This generation is largely forming their own paths because they didn't live the same childhoods that their older generations did. They don't have any sort of attachment to that status quo, so they don't see work and life the same way as those of us in the older generations do. Gen Z also values career growth, and this makes a lot of sense. These individuals are young and just starting out in their careers, so they want to work somewhere that provides them with a future and opportunities to learn and grow so they can expand their earning potential. They're not looking to make entry-level salaries forever, and while they know that entry-level salaries are really when they are just starting out, they also want to know that they have something to work towards. But the problem is that most Gen Zers don't see the automotive as an industry that offers them the flexibility and future that they're looking for. Another automotive industry survey found that Gen Zers link the auto industry to long work hours, unsafe working conditions, and physically demanding work. And only 29% said that they see the auto industry as better than most careers as it relates to flexibility and work-life balance. And roughly half do not see the industry as an attractive field for young people. So overall, the industry has a reputation and a perception issue among younger workers. And this overall perception issue is reflected in tech school enrollment. The number of graduates completing tech schools has dropped 20% since 2020. That is a huge drop over the course of just 3 years. And this is really only going to get worse unless we make an effort to change the way that people view the industry. So what can you do to shift the perception around younger job seekers? Of course, you can't change an entire generation's mindset overnight, but you can take a page out of a playbook that younger people are certainly familiar with, and that is consumer marketing. Think about how you would market your cars and your dealerships to local customers. You develop key messages around why you're unique and what you offer customers that other dealerships in the area don't offer. You'd probably highlight your excellent customer service, your family history in the community, competitive pricing, and any number of other things that you'd like to highlight. Then you'd probably develop great branding materials to help you stand out. You might also run ads on TV. Maybe you run print ads. You obviously have a social media presence, and you continue to build a website that really sells your dealership. The right message on the right channel to the right audience is how you earn business as a dealership and truly as any business. The same concept needs to be leveraged for your jobs and your dealership as an employee. You need to craft messaging that resonates with your target audience. So for Gen Z, that's going to be messaging around what you can offer them long-term career-wise and how you can make their work-life balance work for them. You need to really sell what they get out of working for you across all of your own channels. So that includes your job ads on Indeed, your career site, social media, etc. So let's take a couple quick examples of a couple things that I like in regards to this topic. So this one uses a great headline at the top of their careers page that cuts right to the concept of career growth for everyone. Then in the copy below that, they highlight how they're a top-rated workplace in the Bay Area and how they offer competitive salary and benefits. And they also mention career paths specifically. They've created a really nice looking site that highlights everything that younger workers today are looking for. Here is another example that's really focusing on career growth. I love the "don't just work a job, work a career" headline, because it really emphasizes that this isn't just a place to work some extra cash. This is somewhere you can really grow and expand your earning potential over time. I also really love that they immediately follow this by saying that a large portion of their team has worked there for more than 20 years, which highlights two things for me. Number one, that it is a great place to work, because who would want to work somewhere that they hate for 20 years, especially in an industry where jobs are aplenty. And number two, it shows that there are opportunities to grow and evolve your career over the course of literally 2 decades. So these best practices also apply to your job descriptions too. So let's take a look at an example here that really does a nice job of rebranding how dealership jobs are perceived. Again, it digs into workplace awards to give a third-party point of view on what it's like to work there, but they also really highlight training, teaching, promotions, things like that, all of which, are really valuable to Gen Z. Same with this example. I love that they say they don't have a one-size-fits-all approach to benefits, which again, really appealing to Gen Z who are looking to change the status quo. They talk about paid training, career growth, and of course, must-haves like parental leave and insurance. So second expectation that we see from Gen Z, and that is the use of mobile in the hiring process. So let's look at some data. When we asked job seekers in our most recent survey if they've ever given up on an application because it was too tough to complete on their phones, 55% said yes. Now, while this generation was most likely to say yes to this answer, the rest of the respondents across all generations answered this question similarly. But I think if you had asked Gen Xers and Boomers this a few years ago, it might not have been the case. So I think what we're seeing is Gen Z is really leading the charge, making this shift towards mobile, and it is by and large becoming the norm for people of all ages. So when it comes to mobile, everyone values it these days, but Gen Z certainly has the highest expectations. Similarly, about 90% of Gen Z respondents said that they'd be open to texting with recruiters if it meant the hiring process would move faster. Again, I think this speaks to Gen Z's digitally native upbringing, and they expect to be able to do everything on their phones because they know it will be easier and faster. And if you think about it, why should the job search be any different? They have the upper hand because you are the ones who need them. So why not just meet them where they want to be on this? So let's take a look at mobile from an application perspective. Remember, this group of people is accustomed to getting anything they want online quickly. No phone books, they don't own printers or scanners, they don't remember a time before online scheduling. And for many, even ordering meals online is something that they've always known. So if you can't find the same experience as they can online at your dealership, they're going to see you as out of touch, outdated, and not an organization that they want to be involved with. So take a second to try and apply to one of your jobs on your phone. Is your job easy to find on your phone? Can you easily fill out the fields? Is it asking for a PDF upload of a resume? Are there a lot of drop downs? Is it slow to load? These kinds of barriers will turn anyone away, but these days it's especially predominant with Gen Z applicants. Take a look at the comparison of the two applications that you see on the screen. The one on the left has large fields and the entire application can be seen on the screen without having to scroll. The one on the right requires a ton of scrolling to get through it. It has a lot of small fields that are difficult to complete, and the dropdowns take up the whole screen, making navigation really tough. It's also asking for a lot of information like previous work experience and education history, which is all information that's kind of difficult to complete on the go. Even if those fields aren't required, it's still just daunting to look at, and it can really deter people from applying. Another way to keep the process moving faster and engage with more Gen Z candidates is by texting them through the process. On average, across all generations, text message open rates are more than 4 times as high as email open rates. And as we know, Gen Z is digitally native, and most of them don't remember a time before cell phones. So this is a really normal and expected way of communication for them. You might think that texting is rude or intrusive if you're a member of Gen X or baby boomers, but it's just not the case for this group. On top of that, email inboxes are just out of control these days with marketing and with spam. So take a look at your phone right now. I bet you the number of unread emails in your personal email account is potentially in triple digits or more, while your text messages are at 0 or close to it. Don't let your messages to schedule interviews or move great candidates along in the process get lost in cluttered email inboxes. Send a text to your candidate to keep things moving faster while also keeping Gen Z candidates engaged. Another finding from our research is that Gen Z job seekers expect transparency more so than their older counterparts. So let's go back to our recent applicant survey results. On the chart on the left-hand side, you'll see that Gen Z respondents were less likely than all other generations to say they'll apply to a job if the salary listed in the job description, if the salary isn't listed in the job description. And if you remove millennials from the equation, the gap between Gen Z and the rest of the pack becomes even larger. Then on the right, you'll see a question we asked respondents who have admitted to ghosting or not showing up to interviews. Gen Z respondents were much more likely to say that they bailed on an interview because the lack of communication and transparency from the employer, or because the job turned out to be something completely different than advertised. This all comes down to transparency. Are you advertising what you're actually offering? Or are you trying to reel people in with the vague job description only for the pay in the job to be something less enticing? So let's look at a couple job description examples of what transparency means. You see a couple of examples of pay transparency here, but this concept even goes beyond pay. Some of these other examples give good transparency into the types of shifts that might be required, like weekends. It's important to be upfront and honest with these expectations if you're going to look to hire younger folks who have little patience for vague and ambiguous language when it comes to job advertisements. I think in this case, you'd probably rather get fewer candidates who are actually interested in the job than hundreds who are going to bail when they realize what the job actually entails. The hiring process is another area where it's important to add transparency. If you're failing to respond to applicants in a timely manner and not clearly setting up with the hiring and onboarding process looks like, you're going to get some no-shows and ghosting happening. The key is to communicate frequently. People want to know what's happening. What next steps are they? What else can you tell them about where they are in the process? You need to stay in touch with them much more often than you think. In fact, according to our study, many respondents want to hear from you daily up until they're onboarded. This is really tough, though. Your team is already strapped for time, and this kind of work is very, very manual, and it can take up so much time you could be using to do other, arguably more important things that actually do require human touch. That's why many dealerships we are seeing in the space are embracing AI and automation. AI and automation might make you feel uncomfortable or sound too futuristic, but the reality is that many of these technologies are already here and are available for you to make your lives easier and help you work smarter, not harder. Using applicant tracking systems that include features like interview scheduling, automated communications to candidates, automated pre-screening surveys, these are all things that can help make your processes run faster and add a layer of transparency for candidates without taking up too much time in your day. So next and finally, we found that Gen Zers are far and away more likely to job hop and look for work elsewhere that meets their needs. But at the same time, they don't burn bridges, so there are opportunities to win them over and get them to come back. When we asked survey respondents to share how long they expect to stay at their next job if they're actively looking, Gen Zers were significantly less likely than older workers to say they're going to stick around long term, which is kind of interesting given that they're much younger and earlier on in their career. So you'd think that they'd be more inclined to say that they're going to stay longer. If you add up the last 3 bars there, only 24% of Gen Zers expect to stick around longer than 4 years. Well, 46% of other generations say they're going to stick around longer than 4 years. But of course, this should not and cannot deter you from looking to hire folks in this age group. Their numbers are only growing as more and more of this group graduate high school, trade schools, colleges. So you have to be able to meet them where they are, and you cannot avoid them forever just because they're less loyal. So in exchange for loyalty, though, what do they want? According to survey results, it's all about the same things we were already discussing earlier: flexibility and growth. If you can provide to them that you can help them determine their skills and grow their earning potential, they will stick around longer, but you really have to show them that. Again, that means that you have to have actual training and development opportunities in place. You have to promote internal mobility by looking to invest and train in younger workers, and then hire internally as much as you can. You want to get these young people in the doors as porters or detailers or car washers and commit to helping them grow and learn new skills and help them move up to more senior positions with higher earning potential. And the same goes for flexibility. Like it or not, this is a generation that is changing the way we look at work. And of course, in retail automotive, there isn't always an option to offer remote work, but I've met with plenty of dealerships who are offering perks like 4-day work weeks, the ability for workers to pick their own schedule and work hours that make the most sense for them. Remote work days, they can also be for workers like sales associates that can do some of their work remotely as well. And even though Gen Zers do tend to be less loyal, they don't burn bridges. What I mean by that is that they are more open than older generations to returning to orgs that they've worked for in the past. So let's say they left you for a new opportunity elsewhere to gain some new skills and responsibilities, and they've grown and experienced something else, but now they want to come back to work for you in a more senior or management position. This is absolutely something you can and should be doing. Good people are going to leave your organization to explore different opportunities. The best that you can do is accept that, support them, and keep the door open for future positions down the line. And one of the best ways to facilitate your boomerang hires is through this concept of talent relationship management. which is where you work to foster long-term relationships with talent at varying levels of association to you over time. That could mean former employees, like I've mentioned already, but also former applicants, former candidates, college students, and even your current employees. Think about this concept as a contrast to traditional recruitment where everything is very linear. You have an open job, you leverage multiple channels to source candidates for that specific job, you pick one, and then you move on. This typically includes familiar channels like job boards, career sites, career fairs. But when you transition towards a more relationship-based recruitment strategy, it becomes critical not only to attract new talent, but also nurture all of the individuals you've previously engaged with from a talent perspective. That means housing all of these individuals in a centralized, accessible database. It means staying in touch with each group proactively and not just when you have open roles. And that might mean sharing updates about your organizations, big wins, policy changes, and things like that. Then, when you do have critical roles open, you can source from this group of previously engaged contacts, which makes the hiring process faster and helps you make better hiring decisions because you already know these people and you have spent time vetting them. This is a concept that I believe can be really effective with younger people. They don't have this attachment to traditional ways of recruitment, and we know they're less likely to burn bridges. So if you meet people at a career fair or college events, or if you hire somebody right out of college and they leave a year later, keep them in your system to nurture them over time. And I bet down the line, there will be people who you end up hiring that make great additions to your team. And that is what I have for you today. A quick summary of a couple of points I want to hit on again. Number one, by the end of 2025, Gen Z is predicted to make up over a quarter of the workforce. Gen Z workers have substantially different life and work experiences than all other generations. And recruiting and hiring them means that you need to redesign your jobs and make sure to fulfill your promises. If you're promising flexibility and fulfilling work, you have to be delivering on it. This is what's going to keep your turnover low and might fuel your referral programs because happy employees refer their friends. Connect with Gen Z on their terms. Meet them on the channels and devices that they prefer. Give them the processes that they want and make it fast and easy. Adhere to what they expect because if you don't, somebody else probably will. And be transparent. Again, if you're not going to be open and honest, they will move on to somebody else who will. And don't waste your time recruiting people with vague offerings only to lose them to ghosting down the line. And finally, consider your relationships with these individuals as long-term relationships. Even if you don't hire them for a role immediately, keep in touch with them. Or if they leave your organization, again, keep in touch with them. Build a database of your previous talent relationships that you can keep close by when you need to source someone for a critical open position. So with that, I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions. We also will be sending this webinar out to you to your emails if you registered, which you did. So we'll be getting this webinar in your email, but we will stay on for some questions. And if you have to hop, thank you for coming. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll stay on another couple seconds for questions.